today what I'm going to share with you guys is this Dart Null Safety feature. And basically, what this is just another feature that's being implemented inside the Dart programming language. Hopefully, in the future, you can use it in your Flutter projects. So, this presentation is based on this Medium article that's written by Philip and Michael, and it's called Announcing Sound Null Safety. So, it has been in technical preview in the previous, like maybe few weeks, right? Or few days actually, and I'm just going to share why I guess we need null safety and how you're going to use the new feature. All right, but before that, I want to introduce you to this $1 billion mistake. So, for those who don't know what this $1 billion mistake, it was created by Tony Hoare, and he basically prioritized run code quickly over safety checks. So the problem back then was that people didn't want to, manually check all of the machine code, right? So he was thinking, how can he actually make these checks faster? So then in the end, he says that, okay, why not we just not prioritize safety checks and put in some null reference in order for it to not like have any errors, right? But little did he know that actually having a null reference actually allows programs to compile and crash on runs, allow memory leaks, and worst of all, cause security issues in the code. And at the same time, because of the programming language C, right? They got the inspiration from him. So in their get function, they introduce also the null reference, which also introduces malware creation. So that get function, you can override the return value by just having this null feature. So in the end, this kind of errors actually accumulate to $1 billion. So viruses, if you guys have known, it shut down systems. And there was once, I forgot what event was it, but there was this malware that shut down a system, and then basically tons of companies unable to run their online businesses, and it was estimated to cost $4 billion in terms in the economy of the damage itself, right? Oops. Yeah. So that's why you can read more. Definitely, I will have the link up in the future videos. But yeah, you can read up on this, and that's why having now reference in historically is not really a good idea. So why now safety? So if the $1 billion mistake doesn't convince you, then I would say that why we should implement, or why it is implemented in Dart, because Dart is a type safe language, but that type safety does not guarantee a variable to have not a null. So for those who have coded out Flutter apps, right, and then you have suddenly null value, and then you like, oh my god, I didn't think of what I should return when there's null value in a function, for example. So personally, for myself, I've faced a lot of this, I would say, errors and debugging sessions, right? So, for example, a simple function that you create, a function that's called print length, where it will require you to have a list of strings, and it's called names, right? So it's a very simple for in loop where it will just run through the list of strings, and then it will print out the different names length, the string length, right? So what are the two ways can this null f this up, right? So there are two ways. The first way is that if you were to put in a null value, then it will just cannot run now, because you can't run a for in loop with null. It's not possible. It's like saying 1 divided by 0. It's, yeah, okay, don't try that. Next is that if you were to have a list and then you have strings, but one of the elements, right, is null. So there are times where sometimes you have a list of data and then there's null. And then I was like, oh no, how am I going to deal with this null value? So sometimes we forget about how we are going to catch these null cases, right? So then this will give an error at the same time, because null.length doesn't, it will just shout an error. So with this, type safety doesn't really make sense. So because that also promotes sound, so basically like sound make in simpler terms, it basically means makes sense, right? So you expect a variable to not have a null value, because if I were to create a variable that's called number, and then suddenly you give me a null value, it's kind of like, why? So, what is sound? So, sound is basically the vibration in the air that we can hear. Just kidding, just kidding. So, sound in Dart, or the sound type system, means you can never get into a state where the expression evaluates to a value that doesn't match what you have already implemented in a variable. So, that's why a sound type system will make what you create make sense. So, what I mean by that is, for example, the first one, we have a variable called number. And then if we were to overwrite the number into a boolean, not a boolean, sorry, into a float, right? Then it will actually have a static check error. So if you were to type it into .pad, or if you were to type it into your IDE, right, this actually causes an error because the variable number is inferred as an integer, not a float. But if you want to have like a dynamic kind of variable that consists or that accepts both a double or integer, then you can point the second example, which is the variable called digit, and then you can put the type as num. So num accepts both double and integer. So if you were to just initialize it with integer, and then suddenly you just want to put a float, and then yeah, it accepts. So you don't have any static type errors, right? So for example, if you were to have this null safety, I'm going to explain in terms of giving a present, right? So your a-hole friend gives you a present, and in that box, or we call it a variable, is empty. But you didn't know. You don't know that the present is empty. So the empty is representing as null. And then when you open the box, you feel shortchanged because you expect your present, or that box present, right, to have something in it, but it's nothing. So you ask your friend, why do you give me an empty box? And your friend say, it's still valid one. So your static type checker says null is valid one. Null is a value for your variable that you assign to. Then I'm like, no, it's gonna give me more errors. Oh my god. So that's why we have null safety. So if there was null safety, you can see whether the present has a chance to be empty. So I will explain more what is nullable variables and such. So now when you see the present, you know there is a chance that it can be empty or null, right? So if you were to see that present, you can punch your friend in the face. All right, so should you migrate your code when the null safety feature actually comes in, or actually currently can you do that? So currently you can't use the feature in your Flutter apps because I've tried it. The only way you can do it is you have to fork this project, and then you have to manually use the Dart language or the version that is inside the what do you call that, technical preview version, or I would say the dev channel, right? So if it was already implemented stable already, I would say not necessarily if you have a current project, because the Dart team has made this feature backward compatibility. So that means, right, if you have your current project and then you wanted to use the null feature that's using the Dart programming language, right, it won't break your app basically. So don't need to worry, don't need to panic. All's good. So thanks to the Dart team and the Flutter team. So in the future, should you implement null safety in your project? And I would say definitely, because with the null safety feature, it is going to make your projects to have less bugs. Who here loves more bugs? The person who like more bugs is a little bit, cuckoo. At the same time, it's optimized because now you have, variables that won't return you null, and then you don't have to check for null, so you have less code to write, and then basically you're going to optimize. So this is very good for users who are a baby, because we refer to them as that. So how do I learn null safety? So one way you can do is to go to the nullsafety.dartpad.dev, which is a website that has Dartpad exercises that you can go through, which I am going to go through. So, no, not thank you. Sorry. All right. So I'm going to go through the Dartpad exercises, only a couple of them. So let me see. Okay, All right, so I'll go through these three nullable types: promotion and late keyword. Also, another thing is also circular reference, right? All right, so let's go to the null safety.dartpad.dev. So once you go into this website, it will look something like this. And then if you were to click on this learn with snippets, there's a lot of exercises that you can go through. So I'm going to go through a couple of them. So the first one, nullable types. So in the actual Dart pad, if you were to have this right on the current Dart version or the Dart programming language, it actually doesn't show any errors, right? But with null safety, right, you could see that this integer a, it is something that is considered non-nullable. So what it means by non-nullable is that you cannot assign this variable called a with the value null. But if you want to, for some reason, you want to have to assign the variable a as the null value, then you can make it into a nullable variable. So currently this is a non-nullable variable. In order for us to make it nullable, you put the question mark. So with this question mark, now you could see that this a variable is a nullable variable, as you can see from this integer question mark over here. So with this, now you can print the statement a is null. So if you were to run this, and there you go, a is null. So if I were to go to .pad, right, and if I were to just go to the void main without this, and then I will just paste it over here. And at the same time, you could see there's no like null checks, which is kind of okay, I mean, for now, but this will give you some null errors in the future. So having this null safety, personally, you will save a lot of trouble. So the next thing is that we're going to go through more nullable types. So we have different variables that we've initialized: a list of strings, a nullable list of strings, and a list of nullable strings. So for the first variable, a list of strings, you have a valid list of strings that is basically a string of the number 1, 2, and 3. So you can print out this normal list, right? But the second one is a nullable list of strings. That means this variable, it will just initialize it as a null value. So where are we going to put this question mark? So in order for us to make this a nullable variable, what we can do is we can put the question mark right after the element type here. So you could see that list over here is the element, sorry, this list over here is the variable type, and this okay, sorry about that. So the element type usually is basically represented as the pointy thing over here, and then you have this question mark. So this question mark will always refer to the outer of the pointy string. So that's why there is no error over here. And then lastly, you will have this a list of nullable strings. So previously in our example, we had a null value in our list of strings, but now we have this variable. How are we going to resolve this error? So if I were to put this question mark as what we have put it in our previous variable, then you can see that the error is not going away. So basically what I've explained is that if you were to put outside the pointy brackets, right, this means that the variable that we initialize the list, right, is going to be nullable, but we want to have the element to be nullable. So what we can do is we can put the question mark inside the element type. So with that, now no errors has been shown, and if you were to run this, everything is okay. So it might be a little bit tricky if you were to have, you know, element types, or you have like map string dynamic, and then you want to have both null for some reason. So make sure you understand how you going to put that question mark. All right, the next thing is I'm going to talk about promotion. So I'm not going to promote you into a higher pay, but this is a promotion that you're going to use inside your Dart Pad Null Safety feature. So what is promotion? Basically, it is what we always wanted when we create functions. Because, for example, over here, it is a simple function called get length. So it only gets the length of the string that you have going to pass in inside this function, which is going to return an integer, right? So this is just an innocent function that we usually create. However, if we know that the string that we're going to pass in is going to be null, we're going to put this, question mark. So how are we going to, with this null safety checks, right? We can actually have an error message that says, all right, so you put the string variable as a nullable variable, right? So that means you need to put a null check, which is great because we need that person, that friend that always says, right, this is, you are missing something. So that's why we're going to put this null check. And that's basically promotion. What it does is it basically checks all of the lines of code. And if you were to put a nullable variable, then it will show an error that says, okay, you must have something that returns when you have a null that's passed into the function, which is great. So in order for us to resolve this problem, what we can do is we can type in a very simple if statement. So if string is equal to null, and then we are going to return a 0. So we just type in return 0, the number 0, not the string 0. All right. So with that said, now you don't have the error. And this is great because not only for experienced developer like us, where we definitely will forget if there wasn't any like null checks, but for beginners who are going to create functions and that they don't know that you need to have some null check if you were to have like, variable that you're going to pass inside the function. So with that said, if you were to run this, then this is going to be 17. So if I were to put the get length as null, as you can see over here, right? So I'm going to pass in a null inside the get length function. And if I want to run it, then you can return 0. So most of the time, we developers always forget there will be like null that's going to be passed into the function. All right, so now let's go through this promotion with exceptions. So exceptions is basically like error message that you can modify, right? So same thing, right? So let's put in an exception. So we are going to resolve this by having a if statement to check whether the string is null. And then at the same time, you are going to throw an exception. So exception. And then inside this exception, this is an object that returns an error, or you can also add in your own message. So it is a string. And then you can type in, for example, string is null. All right. So I put a semicolon. And then if you were to run this, you can see that your custom error message comes out. So for myself, I would like to make it more specific on what kind of function where my string, or I would say string param is null. So I would say get length string params is null, right? So to make it more obvious, so because when you want to debug your code, right, you have no idea what this error means. So getting it to be more specific will help inside your debugging experience as well. So when you put a null, you definitely know that someone or a use case that you forgot or overlooked is where the exception, like you know exactly which function is throwing this exception or error. All right. So the next one that I'm going to go through is this thing called late circular reference. All right. Wait, let me see if I'm forgetting anything. So let me go back. So there is another thing that's called the late keyword, right? So I think most of us are usually late for our meetings, but that's fine. And the thing is, when should you use this late keyword, or what this late keyword basically do? So in its essence, late keyword basically say that, okay, so for this variable, it's not initialized first, so you don't have to initialize it. So it's used mostly inside object creation. And usually what you will tell that is that you aren't going to assign it right away. So, and then at the same time, you're going to assign it the value later. So basically an object, and then after that, you'll make sure that it's assign a value before it's accessed. So an object or class that you create, for example, a meal, and then you have your field called description. And the thing is, if you were to put inside the normal Dart programming language, this will be fine. However, now with the null safety check, this is that okay, you need to assign this a variable, a value. So if you were to like have this error, you probably like, okay, so why not I just put an empty string? So the thing is that this might not be good because for some developers this might not be like a good practice. So a good, and also at the same time it's expensive because you're going to initialize this mail description with an empty string. So why not optimize it, right? So late is more towards optimizing it, and by putting the keyword late. So with this right now, it says to the Dart programming language, let's say, okay, so this description field, I'm going to initialize it later. So now with this mail, right, at the same time, it has a method that's called set description. So it takes in a string, basically a setter method that overrides the current description with the string that is passed into the method. So for example, inside your main method, you create an instance of a meal, and then you're going to set the description as Fuejura. I'm going to butcher this pronunciation, but you are going to basically initialize the current description, or you're going to set the description of your instance, right? And then you're going to print it out. So if you were to run this, yeah, it works. So with this, it actually helps with optimization. And the next one is maybe this may be familiar to you guys, where you have like circular references. So circular references means that you have two objects referring to each other. So how are you going to remove that case where it's like, okay, what if one of it is not initialized, right? So with this, right, you're going to put in the late keyword. So where are we going to put the late keyword? Can you put the late keyword with a final? So let's check it out. So I'm going to type in the word late final quotes. Right. So that means you actually can put the late keyword with the final keyword as well. So this doesn't like have any more errors now, because now we know that we are going to initialize it later. And this is how it goes. So you have like a team object and a coach object, and both of them are referring to each other because it makes sense. You in a team you have a coach, and in a coach you have a team. So you create instance of both a team and coach, and then you refer to both of them. And then once you are done, you can run this, and then great. So all is done. So this is really something that I think might be familiar to some of you, or might be interesting to some of you guys as well. All right. And last and but not least, late and lazy, which we are right now in this weekend. We are lazy and late for most stuff. So with this, right, I really want to showcase on how this late and lazy actually helps you to optimize your code. If you were to, for example, run this thing, and okay, before running this thing, actually it runs for us. But we have here a simple private function. So usually when you want to create something private, you probably get a room, or you just put a underscore, so to represent that a function or variable is what do you call that, private in its own scope. So you have a compute value over here that prints out computing value and returns a number 3, right? And then you have a class or an object that is called cached value provider. So basically, like maybe you have some cache and you don't want to initialize it at first, right? And then you have this final cache where you use this compute value that you have created over here. So this cache will be assigned to the value 3, and then you have a getter method that returns the current cache, which is called value. So inside this main method, we have this print statement that says calling constructor. And then you will create an instance of the object called provider using the cache value provider object. And then you will print this getting value, and the value is provider. So if you were to look over here, if I were to run this, right, you will, yeah, it makes sense, right? So the first one, the print statement, it says calling constructor. And then the second one, because you create this instance of an object, you actually you actually run this function called compute value, and then you will run this print statement, and that's why you see the computing value at the second statement. And then the third print statement is getting value, makes sense. And then the fourth statement is basically trying to get what is the provider value. Now, if we were to put the late keyword into our cache over here, because currently it's not being initialized, being referred at the end over here, provider.value, right? So we can put this late keyword. And now if we were to run it, and what is it? What is going to be the difference in this print statement? I'll give you a hint. It has to do with computing value and getting value. So let's run this. And now if you see the computing value and the getting value, it actually swaps. So getting value is actually called first. Why is that so? Because, right, due to this late keyword, we are not actually calling this compute value, because we are not referring to the value until we do this print statement. So it just temporarily makes it will just does not run this final variable, this cache inside this cached value provider object they have created. And then after that, it says computing value, and then this computing value will only be run once we refer this dot value. So that's great, because what if we are not referring to any what do you call that, properties of an object, right? Then this will not run anything at all. So this is a very cool feature that I think most of you guys will do as well. So I think that's about it for this demonstration. So I did not go through the other one. So you have like definite assignment. I gone through the late circular assignment and late and lazy. So I missed out the definite assignment. Sorry about that. So that's about it for this Dart Null Safety. So I am very excited for this Null Safety feature to come out, because like when you create your apps in the future, it's going to be definitely less buggy, and you definitely will know what you can actually what do you call that, get, because when you get a value, you know that it's going to be either a nullable value or non-nullable value. So thank you for this. And all right, so David Tran, let me answer your question first. Void main integer x string y equal x to integer print y is non-nullable. It's non-nullable. It prints y. So for the y variable, right, is non-nullable. This one also works. So you have to go to the null safety, right? So I haven't gone through definite assignment. Okay, let me go through definite assignment. Okay, basically it's, so this is assertion basically. So you have a nullable value, right? And the thing is that if you want to assign a non-nullable value into a nullable variable, right, what you can do is to put an exclamation mark. So for example, you have this could return null but doesn't. So you have a function could return null but doesn't, and then this is a nullable variable. But for this integer a is a non-nullable variable. So what you can do is you can actually put an exclamation mark. So that means that, okay, so this will definitely return me a non-nullable value. So because for this function, you know that it only returns -3. So that is, so for that example, right, it will not work in the new feature, but if you were to put inside .dev, it will definitely work, but inside the null safety feature, it will not work. So if you were to use this, then you will have to use this exclamation mark basically. All right, so let's see. So it's not really a bug. Let me see. Next question by David Tran also. So integer a is equal to null, string b is equal to a dot to string. So the same thing is also right. You have to make the exclamation dot to string. Okay. So if you were to put dot to string, let me put this example. So if I were to put dot to string, it will not work, because you have to put the exclamation mark so that it will convert to its, okay, and also at the same time needs to be a string as well. Sorry about that. Right. Okay, so okay, let me put this example over here. All right. So for example, for this string, oops, dot to string. Okay. Let me see. So we have a non-nullable value, and then suddenly, sorry, we have a nullable variable, and then we have this dot to string. So this will then make it into a string variable. So I think you're right. Sorry, if I got the question mixed up, right? So basically, when you put this into dot to string, right, this will actually just return you a string. It doesn't return you a nullable string. It will just return you the type string, right? So I think that's what you're trying to say. If you were to put dot to string, so this works as well also, right? So I think it's not a bug further, right? Okay. Yeah. If using, it might also crash if that value is now. If using this, it might, if that value is now. Yes, it will crash. So for this assertion operator, right? This is like a for side. If you think definitely this value, this nullable variable, right, is definitely going to return me a value, then it will just become okay. But if not, then you have an exception, right? So this is, I wouldn't, that's why I didn't go through this, because this means that you really are confident that the return value of a nullable variable is definitely going to be a value that's not null. So that's one thing that I will not try to use. I will probably use this feature sparingly, but in the end, this null safety will actually help make this kind of foresight be less prevalent. Yeah. So you don't have to actually think about the use cases, because you know that if you were to use a non-nullable variable, you only get the non-nullable value as well. But yep. So that's about it. I think most of the questions are around the same. Let me see one more questions. So string x equal to null, integer y equal to x not null. For others, you have to add. Right. So you don't have to put the question mark. So there's another feature. Yeah, let me see. Is it conditional access, right? So there's another feature called conditional access. And basically in this example, x question mark dot length. So in the current dot thing, right? X question mark will return you a null. And then it will basically see the next thing, whether it is basically like return you a null and then dot something else. So this is something that we have to do. Do you know when this feature? I don't know. Okay, so basically what this conditional access does is that it will short circuit everything. So for example, you have this big thing, right? And then after that, so you have a big thing object that has a little thing object inside it. And this little thing object has a fetch integer method inside it, right? So now with the big thing as a instance of an object, you want to have this question mark over here, because you put this big thing as a nullable value. However, if I were to put this over here inside the dot pad, yeah, then it will have a like a non-nullable, sorry, this is this one. So it has this question mark, which basically if I were to run this will actually give me an error, because big question, oh, it doesn't return me a, sorry, it will not return me a 12. But if I were to, for example, have this big thing as null, right? And then if I were to, because you don't have any null safety check, right? This will actually gives me an error, right? Or it doesn't show me anything, because yeah. So by doing question mark and another question mark, it will return me null if I'm not wrong. Yeah. So because if you were to have a null value, you have to put two question mark, because you are expecting this big thing to be a null value. But with this null safety, then you can just short circuit everything, and then you don't need to have that two question marks. So this will be enough. All right. So David, I don't know when this feature will go live, but it is inside the technical preview of the Dart programming language. Yeah, you can go to the Medium article, and it will show you how you can actually use the current tech preview inside the Dart Dev channel. So I will, the slides will be up. Well, I will share the slides later on. And is it difficult to migrate? So let me see. Is it difficult to migrate existing Flutter app to support type safety? Maybe if you have. So the thing is, you can't. So you can't migrate your existing Flutter app because I personally tried it. Maybe I didn't try it correctly or not, but I tried to use the Dart Dev. What do you call that? The Dart Dev code. What do you call that? The current tech preview in a simple Flutter app, it doesn't really work. You have to put in some flags for it to work. So so for now, I think it is you can't really what do you call that, migrate it. But it is not difficult because it is backward compatible. That means whether you use the null safety check or not, it is still okay. So they are going to build some tools for you to convert your current Flutter app into the null safety type. So you don't need to worry so much about that. So yeah, they're gonna have a migration tool to support in automating many of the steps to upgrade your existing packages and apps. So I would say not to worry so much. But I personally haven't migrated.